What's going on? It's your boy DameSmiff, and I am here for another episode of Musician Talks. And today we're gonna have a quick conversation about the Department of War. And so the important part about this is that we're gonna have a conversation and kind of direct it towards how it'll affect musicians and what it really looks like to be an artist or a musician with the effects of something like the Department of War. So the big reason why I'm covering this is because there's been talks about the return of the Department of War and why there has been a shift from even having it in the United States in the first place. But in order to understand it better, we're going to take a little journey down history and we're going to check out what it is, how its history has truly affected artists and musicians specifically, and then what we can probably glean from the history itself. So, with the help of our AI buddy Gemini here, we're going to pull up a quick little brief understanding of what's going on. And all I did was simply ask for what is the Department of War and how does it affect musicians directly? And then I told Gemini the purpose of this video. And this is what it developed for me. And so if you enjoy videos like this, make sure you hit the like button and also make sure you subscribe so you can catch the latest video I have. So let's take a look at what Gemini has for me. So it's broken it down into bullet points, but it's giving me pretty much snapshots of the historical timeline as well as its purpose connected to the context of this video. So, number one, we have the Department of War, 1789 to 1947. And so, for me, just hearing those two times is crazy. Like, just imagine what was going on in 1789 and 1947 was not that long ago in the context of, just time itself, right? So, it has been around for a very, very long time, but let's see how it works with the pitch to artists. So, imagine a government agency whose name was brutally honest. It wasn't the Department of Peacekeeping or Defense as it is today. It was the Department of War. Its purpose was explicit, and it was to organize violence and mobilize the nation to win conflicts. Now, for some people, that might seem like, whoa, intense, right? But you got to really understand the purpose of what's going on. And so we'll dive deeper and we'll get more understanding. So it says, for an artist, this department represents the state mobilizing culture. When the Department of War needed to convince a peaceful population to fight, they didn't just use laws, they used songs, posters, and films. They understood that you cannot win a war without winning the imagination of the public first. So we'll stop here and we'll break down at least my understanding of what we just read. And it's that even if you do have a generally peaceful culture, like, I'm peaceful. I don't walk around putting my hands on people and being mean. I would say the meanest thing I probably do is, trash talk on a video game online. Like, I'm not the type of person that would need a Department of Defense or War, to defend against, right? But in reality, there are things that are threats to, good people, good things and nice things. So how do you mobilize those people in these cultures of generally good, normal, peaceful people to utilize the tools that are available to them to defend themselves from these threats? Well, when you first think about it, like if you were really, really, really angry or something, right? Or you felt you were wronged, to then do something about it, you would have to kind of understand what's available because your first thought may be, just frown or like express the anger, right? But to actually get a result may be outside of your sensibilities, right? And so you kind of have to understand what you're capable of. And so for many people, walking up to the person that wronged you and like confronting them is maybe not their strong suit. So a formal email may work a little better. You see how there's like different options, right? And so when it comes to something as big as of a threat as like your entire nation, how do you mobilize an entire group of people in the form of a formal email? Right? And so for us as musicians, that would be our music, our lyrics, our meetings or interviews. For artists, that could be paintings, that could be graffiti, that could be simply for poets, that can be the poems you express out into the public, out to others, and then kind of influencing the mindset and the perspective on different things that are happening in real time around you. So a lot of the things that are going on at the time you will need a Department of War or even defense will really be based on how the people utilizing it view the threat. So if you don't think there's any problems, a lot of your music will pretty much sound peaceful. But if there is a time to where you need to rise up and maybe defend your beliefs or maybe right or wrong, the songs will sound a little different and maybe feel a little different. To give you a real life example, rap beef is a great real time example of this, because you'll see rappers going from, hey, clap your hands and dance and do all this happy stuff, to now I want to shoot people who wronged me and where are the guys I was looking for yesterday, right? It's a very very different mood, feeling, and vibe. And the reason for that is so that they can kind of, I guess, express the defense that they need to invoke amongst the people around them. I don't know why musicians do this today without like any rural purpose, but rap beef is the realest example we have right now when it comes to musicians and things like that. But we'll get further into historically how nations use musicians and things like posters and films to kind of, express themselves when it's time, or let's say, I'll say war. We'll just keep it simple. Times of war. So, point number 2, how it affected musicians, the soft power machine. So it says the Department of War was deeply intertwined with the music industry. It realized that music was essential for two things: morale, keeping soldiers sane, and propaganda, keeping civilians supportive. So we can stop here and kind of glean from this, because I actually had a few different examples, and I could probably find them on YouTube. Let's see if I could actually do that. But while I talk over here, but basically, there is a kind of therapeutic response that we all have when it comes to music and things like that. And so one of the big things that I learned was that when people listen to sad music, they not only feel sad, right, but they can relate to the sadness. So they don't have to actually experience the things in the music to simply relate. And once you understand that piece, then you can understand why certain cultures sing certain songs, why certain cultures have certain songs for certain reasons, certain moments, and certain memories and people. And so you'll then see why, to make it super simple, why a wrestler would have a theme song, why a movie would have a theme song, right? Songs have a purpose. But what purpose would a song have for a soldier on the field? What does that sound like? What would you write for them? Put in the comments below. What kind of lyrics would you give a soldier today that's out on the field and just trying to keep it together? And they're fighting a fight for you. You see what I'm saying? What does that sound like? And so the Department of War had to kind of figure that out, but they had to figure that out for everyone. And this was something that I had to learn, and it was really from like a video where it was talking about how let me see if I can find it. If I can't find it, I'll just regurgitate the story the best I can. I believe I found it here. Okay, cool. I think I found it. So I'll pull it up here and then we'll come back to Gemini and we will check it out. But the coolest thing about this video is that it essentially kind of highlights the effect of music. It transcends nations, it transcends laws and all that. But essentially, the idea behind what I'm about to show you is that you can really find value in the purpose, the timing, and the presentation of something like music. And so we have here a gentleman, I believe this is a soldier who was going up against, I believe, a German sniper at the time. But I'll let him tell the story here. I want to make sure I got all the proper audio and everything correct for you guys. Let's go good. Okay.
My name is Jack Leroy Tuller. This is 2 weeks after D-Day. It was dark, raining, muddy, and I'm stressed. So I get my trumpet out, and the commander says, Jack, don't play tonight because there's one sniper left. I thought to myself, that German sniper is as scared and lonely as I am. So I thought, I'll play his love song. Dun, dun, dee, 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 dee. next morning, here came a jeep up from the beach about a mile and a half away. And the military police says, "Hey, Captain, there's some German prisoners getting ready to go to England." One of them keeps saying in broken English, "Who played that trumpet last night?" And he burst into songs. He said, "When I heard that number that you played, I thought about my fiance in Germany.
Mm.
I thought about my mother and dad, and about my brothers and sisters, and I couldn't fire." And he stuck out his hand, and I shook the hand of the enemy. He was no enemy. He was scared and lonely like me. The power of music.
So yeah, and that kind of proves its effect on music for people. It really doesn't really have any kind of like standard. It transcends history, it transcends race, it transcends nationalities, all that stuff is really, really, really amazing stuff. And I think for most people, like I said, when they understand this and they get to it, and they start playing their instruments and things like that, it becomes almost like a, I can say, fraternity, almost like a brotherhood, sisterhood. You join a connection with a group of people, and the idea that they're all connected just through the music, it's kind of something that you can't teach. But the Department of War, their purpose was trying to utilize that for honestly what they believed was a good thing at the time, or like I said, mobilizing a culture. So this is the job of musicians when it comes to these kind of types of things. And that was a good story to kind of show you the things that they face. So as we get further along, it says that the invention of viral music. So all of you try to go viral today, right? So when we think about the word viral, a lot of us like to think of popularity. A lot of people like to think of views, streams, some trends and things like that. But the real point of it is that it is influential. Okay. That is the point. It's meant to corral minds, culture, and make it all unified and at least express one unified message or perspective. And so it says that before radio was dominant, the Department of War relied on sheet music to spread messages. So the hit Over There by George M. Cohan, the government helped push this song until it became the anthem of intervention. Its effect was that it turned the abstract idea of foreign policy into a catchy melody that people hummed in their living rooms. This was arguably the first massive state sanctioned viral media campaign, and that's in World War One. Okay, before we go into the V-Disc program or World War Two, is just I just want to take a second and kind of just shine a light on how that parallels today, right? So we do have a lot of the people who will put their beliefs, their politics, even their lifestyles in their music, and they'll try to make it catchy enough for you to hum along in your song in your living rooms, right? And so when we think about how people may resent, reject, or resist certain messages and things like that, you have to be very, very intentional. Something I always preach on this channel about what you put in your music, because eventually it will be in people's living rooms. So let's go into part B, World War II, which is the V-Disc program. And it says that this is the most critical piece of history for musicians. During World War II, there was a recording ban by the American Federation of Musicians. Commercial recording stopped. And the exception was that the Department of War, or the War Department, as it says here, created the Victory Disc program. They gathered artists like Frank Sinatra, Louis Armstrong, and Glenn Miller to record special records only for soldiers. The result? The military became the only entity producing new music for a period. This kept the recording industry alive and spread American jazz and swing globally as soldiers left these discs behind in Europe and Asia. So now when you think about how in Europe and Asia today, when we think about K-pop, hip hop, and Latin jazz and all these things like that, how it was spread. And from the story we seen with the German sniper, it it was almost like selling itself, the cultures that was within the music. And the only reason it worked in this instance for World War II was that they actually had a huge intention on investing in the production of music. Like it said, commercial recording stopped. So of course there were musicians playing, there were definitely shows and people telling their stories. But commercially, all of the investment went into producing the music from the American Federation of Musicians. That's where it came from. So now let's go back down further and see what it says about the combat artist, meaning I'm assuming the musician used for combat. And so it says the Department of War didn't trust cameras to tell the whole story. Now, the reason they didn't trust stories is up for interpretation. Let me know in the comments below what you think. But it says they believed an artist's eye could capture the emotion of war better than a lens. Now, that could be very controversial and problematic because the influence of that artist is not their own. And of course, you know me and how I feel about that. So let's continue. And we're just reading history, so that's just what it says. They established the Army Art Program, hiring actual painters and sketch artists to deploy with troops. Its purpose was to humanize the war effort. A photo shows a tank, a sketch shows the exhaustion in the soldier's eyes. And so a lot of the times when people do visualize war, they think of like fucking Call of Duty, your favorite actor running down the street with a, BDUs and a rucksack. But the real reality is that, just like again in the story of the German sniper, that's just a young boy who's fighting for his home, or a young girl who's fighting for their home. And so, at the end of the day, when you try to humanize the effort, how do you do that as an artist, and how do you do that for an entire nation? When again, the idea is that you're mobilizing a peaceful culture. You want them to humanize what they're doing, but it's the Department of War. So it's not necessarily easy. It's not something that's kind of like simple to do for people. So they thought in their head, just showing you cameras is not going to necessarily influence you to win the war. Some people may see the truth and reject it, resist it, or even submit to it. But if the Department of War needs you to fight, stand up, and be triumphant, what would that sound like? What does that look like? And so that's why they chose artists. And that's my interpretation of, why they chose to do it. But again, let me know in the comments how you interpret this. And so let's continue on. And I believe we have simply two more points here and we will be done. And so we have the famous alumni. So it says that to show musicians that this isn't abstract history, remind them that some of the greatest American artists were essentially employees of the War Department or successor branches during their drafts. And it says that the military experience shaped their sound. So this is actually Gemini saying that I should pretty much highlight some of the artists that actually had some military experience. And so Jimi Hendrix, which is actually an amazing guitar player. For those of you young, super young, born in the year 20 whatevers, go look up Jimi Hendrix. And it says that he was enlisted as a paratrooper, the Screaming Eagles, to avoid jail. That's actually insane. The noise and chaos of airborne training arguably influenced his chaotic, feedback heavy guitar sound. So a lot of his music is just wild. And like at the time when he's playing, it's only him playing this way. So that's why his name is the name it is. But again, look up Jimi Hendrix. Amazing. Tony Bennett, John Coltrane, both of these guys, look them both up. But it says that Tony Bennett served as an infantry in World War II. Oof, the horrors he saw made him a lifelong pacifist, which colored the deep melancholy in his later ballads. That's kind of crazy. A lot of soldiers do have these experiences where a lot of people, when we talk about humanizing the experience in war or the war effort, we tend to have these like real surface level type questions we ask them, and it's not wrong. It's just there's a little bit of couth you want to have when you're talking to veterans and things like that. So like we'll just be like, oh, so what'd you see? What'd you do? And it's like, take it a little easy. It's deep what we put these people through for our safety and for our freedoms and things like that. So just have a little grace for them. And then lastly, we have John Coltrane. It says he played in a Navy jazz band, the Melody Masters. Now, military bands are beasts. They are amazing musicians. But it says, which was one of the few integrated spaces in a segregated military, allowing him to refine the skills that would change jazz forever. And so you got to remember, he's serving the military. That's like a life thing, right? Being a musician is an artist thing. So the segregation, the racism, the uphill battles he could have went through, that could have turned him away from this journey. So just keep that in mind. Along with being a soldier, he had to deal with all of that. And lastly, we have our final point, the general view of society and the Great Rebranding. This is the most philosophical point for your audience. And there's Jim and I talking about you. In 1947, the Department of War was dissolved and replaced by the Department of Defense. And this matters because war is an action. It implies an event with a start and an end. Defense is a permanent state of being. See, that's a great way to look at it. I like how that's worded. It says the shift is that by changing the name, the government changed how society views conflict. We went from a nation that goes to war, temporary mobilization, to a nation that maintains defense, permanent military industrial complex. Okay. And so for artists, this shift normalized the military's presence in daily life, meaning like we just see, soldiers throughout. We got National Guard just walking through the street. It's meant to be a part of the industrial complex, right? And so it says that before 1947, a large standing army was seen as un-American. After 1947, it became the backdrop of our society. So this was actually super cool to check out. And again, find more information about the Department of War. Let's have the conversation in the comments. And if you want me to continue this conversation, particularly on this topic, let me know and we'll make a part 2. But what this has taught me is that it's easy for a lot of us to assume what we're hearing is something that's, personal or creative from the individual performing the music. But in reality, we may have to, in hindsight, look at some of our favorite songs from the 1700s and on and see what music really represents artists as individuals, as groups and bands and orchestras, or nations, cultures, societies. So let me know. What do you think? This was Musician Talks with DameSmiff, and I will see you guys next time. Peace. There is a light that shines in the darkness. His name is Jesus. His name is Jesus. The light of the world. There is a light that shines. Are y'all ready? Here we go. I'm going up to the North Pole, and I'm gonna knock on Santa's door. Up to the North Pole, and I'm gonna knock on Santa's door. When I get there, I'm gonna dance on the side of the road. Now, when you get to Santa's village, it might be a little cool. When you get to Santa's village, it might be a little cold. But when you get there, everything is story ever told.
you why